Eric thought he had it all, a stable marriage, a comfortable home, and a life built on trust. But when a late-night text reveals his wife Rachel's year-long affair, his world shatters. Fueled by betrayal, Eric meticulously plans his revenge, taking control of their finances and unraveling their marriage with cold precision. As the layers of Rachel's deceit are exposed, the couple becomes locked in a bitter battle of blame, regret, and unspoken emotions. But just as Eric begins to reclaim his life, Rachel's desperate attempts to reconcile take a tragic turn. In the aftermath, Eric is left questioning the cost of justice, the weight of forgiveness, and whether some wounds can ever truly heal. This gripping tale of love, betrayal, and the haunting consequences of revenge delivers a gut-wrenching conclusion that will leave readers stunned. The air was thick with the mundane rhythm of life. I suppose that's how deception thrives, in the spaces where everything seems perfectly ordinary. Rachel and I had been married for 12 years, and though the edges of our relationship had dulled, I never imagined they would fray this way. Our routines felt safe. Each morning, I would brew the coffee while Rachel prepped her laptop for her busy day. Her job as a social media consultant demanded constant connectivity, a detail I admired but rarely questioned. She often worked late into the evenings, claiming her clients thrived on deadlines and nocturnal creativity. I believed her. That's what trust is, isn't it? A quiet faith in someone else's narrative. One evening, that faith unraveled. Rachel was in the shower, her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Normally, I would ignore it, privacy was sacred in our marriage. But this time, something was different. Perhaps it was the odd hour, or maybe a nagging feeling I couldn't name. Whatever it was, I reached for her phone and tilted the screen toward me. A single message from a contact named Tom glared back at me, "Miss you already, can't wait for the next trip." The words hit like a sudden gale, knocking the breath from my lungs. My fingers, trembling, unlocked her phone. Rachel had never been secretive about her passcode, it was our anniversary date. I scrolled through the texts, my heart pounding as if trying to drown out the words I was reading. Inside jokes I didn't understand. Late-night messages timed for when I had long since fallen asleep. Explicit exchanges that turned my stomach. The truth was laid bare, line after line, emoji after emoji. This wasn't some harmless friendship. This was betrayal. By the time Rachel emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in her floral robe, the air between us had shifted. She froze when she saw her phone in my hand, her face instantly paling. "Eric," she said cautiously, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "What are you doing?" I held up the phone, the messages still glaring on the screen. "Explain this." Her gaze flicked from me to the phone, panic flashing in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak but closed it again. Then came the tears, familiar, manipulative tears. "I can explain," she stammered. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think." I snapped, the anger bubbling to the surface. "Rachel, I'm looking at months, no, years, of messages. What exactly am I supposed to think?" She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she wiped at her tears. "It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. You've been so distant, Eric." I felt lonely. Lonely. The word hung in the room, sour and unconvincing. I clenched my fists, the phone slipping from my grip onto the bed. "So your solution to loneliness was to cheat? With him? Who the hell even is Tom?" She looked away, biting her lip. "He's a colleague. It started during a conference. I didn't mean for it to happen, it just did." "It just did," I repeated bitterly, pacing the room. "How convenient. And what about all those trips you claimed were for work? Were they all lies?" "No," she protested. "Not all of them. Just some." The admission was a gut punch. This wasn't some one-time indiscretion, this was a pattern, a secret life she had cultivated behind my back. The woman I had built my life around wasn't the person I thought she was. For the first time, I couldn't look at her. The very sight of Rachel, with her tear-streaked face and trembling hands, filled me with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "I need time," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I can't. I just can't deal with this right now." She reached for me, but I stepped back, her touch suddenly unbearable. "Eric, please." I cut her off. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Don't follow me." As I shut the door to the guest room, the reality of what I had uncovered hit me like a tidal wave. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? And what was I supposed to do now? The answers didn't come that night. Sleep eluded me, replaced by a relentless cycle of anger, betrayal, and despair. By morning, one thing was clear: I couldn't let this slide. I needed the full truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next day, while Rachel acted as though nothing had happened, I began my search for answers. A friend had once mentioned a private investigator who specialized in cases like this. The thought of hiring one felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than Rachel was willing to admit. By lunchtime, I had made the call. The investigator, a no-nonsense man named Greg, assured me he would uncover the truth. His confidence was both reassuring and terrifying. What would he find? And would I be able to handle it when he did? Rachel's demeanor in the days that followed only added fuel to my suspicions. She was overly attentive, as if trying to erase the damage with kindness. She cooked my favorite meals, left little notes on the fridge, and even suggested we plan a getaway together. It was all too late. The investigator's report came a week later. Sitting alone in my car, I tore open the envelope, my hands trembling. Inside were photographs, financial records, and a neatly typed summary of her infidelity. The evidence was damning. The photographs showed Rachel and Tom together during her supposed business trips, their body language intimate and unmistakable. The financial records revealed money siphoned from our joint account, money that had gone toward gifts and weekends away with him. She had not just betrayed me emotionally but financially, too. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The grief and anger that had consumed me gave way to a cold, calculated resolve. Rachel had shattered our marriage, and she would face the consequences. Rachel's betrayal didn't just hurt, it hollowed me out. There were moments I felt like a ghost in my own life, drifting through the house we had built together, unable to reconcile the memories of our love with the reality of her actions. But the anger sustained me. It gave me focus. And as the days turned into weeks, I knew I couldn't let her walk away unscathed. The private investigator's findings were my armor. Every page, every photo, every bank statement detailing her secret life was a piece of the truth she had tried so hard to hide. The weight of the evidence was staggering, but it also crystallized my next steps. This wasn't just about retribution, it was about reclaiming control over a life she had derailed. Rachel remained oblivious to my plans. Her attempts at normalcy were almost insulting. She'd cook elaborate dinners, her tone chipper as if she could erase the past with roasted chicken and mashed potatoes. She'd ask about my day, her eyes wide with hope that I'd smile, that I'd forget. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. One evening, I sat across from her at the dining table, my plate untouched. She was talking about a new client, her voice filled with feigned enthusiasm. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one in the photos Greg had taken. The dichotomy was dizzying. "Eric," she said, breaking my reverie. "Are you even listening?" "No," I said flatly, pushing my chair back and standing. "I'm not." Her face fell, but I walked away before she could respond. I couldn't stomach her pretense any longer. The anniversary weekend was approaching, a date that would have once been cause for celebration. This year, it would be the perfect stage for my reckoning. I began to move swiftly, ensuring every detail was accounted for. First, I met with a divorce lawyer, someone Greg had recommended. Her name was Karen, and she was as sharp as she was relentless. "You've got a strong case," she said, flipping through the folder of evidence I had brought. "Infidelity, financial misconduct, potential misuse of marital funds. We'll make this quick." "Quick is good," I replied, though I knew nothing about this process would feel fast enough. Karen outlined the steps we'd take. The divorce papers would be ready by the end of the week, and I would serve them on our anniversary. It felt poetic, in a twisted sort of way. Rachel had chosen to break our vows, and I would choose to end them on the day we had once celebrated our union. While Karen prepared the legal side, I turned my attention to our finances. Rachel and I shared a savings account, one we had built together over the years. It was meant for vacations, emergencies, and future plans that now felt laughable. Using her carelessness to my advantage, I withdrew my half, depositing it into a new account she couldn't touch. The remaining balance would become a point of contention in the divorce, but that was a battle for another day. I also made changes to our will. Though we didn't have children, we had assets, real estate, investments, and a vacation property we had inherited from her parents. My new will ensured that my portion of everything went to my brother. Rachel would not profit from her betrayal. The last step was psychological. I needed to remain calm, composed, and unyielding. Rage would only give her power. No, I needed to hit her with cold precision. The night before our anniversary, Rachel suggested we go out to dinner. "I want to make it special," she said, her voice tinged with forced cheerfulness. I nodded. "Sure. Let's do that." Her face lit up, mistaking my agreement for forgiveness. She kissed me on the cheek, a gesture that once would have sent warmth through me. Now, it was nothing more than an empty formality. The next morning, I woke early, the weight of the day heavy on my chest. I had everything ready, a small box wrapped in silver paper, the perfect disguise for what lay inside. As Rachel bustled around the kitchen, humming to herself, I placed the box on the counter. "What's this?" she asked, turning to me with a curious smile. "A gift," I said, keeping my tone light. Her eyes lit up as she unwrapped the box. Inside, she found a stack of papers, photographs of her with Tom, screenshots of their messages, financial records, and finally, the divorce papers. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. "Eric, what is this?" "It's everything you've hidden from me," I said, my voice steady. "And it's my way of telling you we're done." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me. "Please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I interrupted. "You made your choices, Rachel. Now you'll live with the consequences." That evening, I packed a bag and left. The house we had shared for over a decade suddenly felt like a prison, its walls echoing with memories I could no longer bear. I didn't tell Rachel where I was going. She didn't deserve to know. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, grief, relief, and an unfamiliar sense of liberation. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my life again. Rachel had taken so much from me, but she wouldn't take my future. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. And that was enough. The aftermath of delivering the truth to Rachel was a strange limbo. I had expected some kind of catharsis, a triumphant sense of reclaiming my life. Instead, I felt hollow. Sitting in a modest hotel room that first night after leaving her, I stared at the ceiling, trying to summon the strength to feel anything. I kept replaying her reaction in my head. The way her hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. The wide-eyed disbelief, the tears that spilled down her cheeks as she stammered for an explanation. The image of her face, crumpled in despair, was burned into my mind. It wasn't regret that tugged at me, though, it was a strange sense of pity. How had we ended up here? What had we lost along the way to become two strangers locked in a battle neither of us wanted? The next morning, I met with Karen to finalize the divorce proceedings. She walked me through the steps, her tone crisp and efficient. "You've got leverage," she said, flipping through the documents I had handed her. "The financial misappropriation alone would sway most judges in your favor. Add the infidelity, and this is as open and shut as it gets." I nodded, the words washing over me like static. It was comforting in a way, knowing that I was on solid ground, but the reality of dismantling a 12-year marriage was heavier than I had imagined. "Do you think she'll fight it?" I asked. Karen shrugged. "Probably. But we're ready for that." True to Karen's prediction, Rachel didn't take the divorce quietly. She called me incessantly, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to seething accusations. "How could you do this to us, Eric?" she sobbed in one message. "I made a mistake, but we can fix this. We've been through so much together. Please, just talk to me." In another, her tone was venomous. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Like you've never done anything wrong. Well, let me tell you something, you're no saint, Eric. You're a coward for running away." I listened to each message only once before deleting it. I had nothing left to say to her. Rachel's attempts to reconcile weren't limited to voicemails. She reached out to mutual friends, painting herself as the victim of my cold, unforgiving heart. The stories trickled back to me, her claims that I had abandoned her without warning, that I was punishing her for a single mistake. At first, I was furious. How dare she twist the narrative to cast herself in a sympathetic light? But as the days went on, I realized it didn't matter. Let her tell her version of the story. The truth was in the evidence, and I had no obligation to defend myself to anyone. One evening, I received a text from a mutual friend, Jason, who had known us since college. "Eric, I just heard from Rachel. She's really torn up. Are you sure this is what you want?" My fingers hovered over the screen as I contemplated how to respond. Finally, I typed back, "She cheated on me, Jason. For over a year. That's not something I can forgive." His reply was immediate, "I didn't know. I'm sorry, man. Let me know if you need anything." The support was a small comfort, a reminder that not everyone would take her side. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months. Rachel contested every decision, from the division of assets to the terms of the settlement. She even tried to argue that I had emotionally neglected her, as if that could somehow justify her betrayal. Karen remained unflappable, countering each of Rachel's claims with evidence that painted a clear picture of her infidelity and financial deceit. The turning point came during the deposition. Rachel, visibly frazzled, stumbled through her explanations, while Karen methodically dismantled her arguments. The judge's expression remained neutral, but I could tell we were gaining ground. When it was over, Rachel caught up to me in the hallway. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice trembling as she called my name. "Eric, please," she said. "Can we talk? Just the two of us." I hesitated, my instinct screaming at me to walk away. But something in her voice, perhaps desperation, perhaps sincerity, made me stop. "Fine," I said. "But make it quick." We found an empty bench in the courthouse lobby. She sat next to me, wringing her hands as she searched for the right words. "I know I messed up," she began. "I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I don't want to lose everything we built together. I don't want to lose you." I shook my head, my resolve firm. "Rachel, you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed the foundation of our marriage. Trust, respect, those things don't come back overnight. If ever. But we can try," she insisted, her voice breaking. "We owe it to ourselves to try." "No," I said, my tone cold but steady. "You owed it to us not to cheat. You made your choice, Rachel. Now you'll live with it. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, defeated. For the first time, I saw the weight of her actions truly sink in. The final hearing came a month later. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me the majority of our assets and ensuring that Rachel would have no further claim to my savings. As I signed the papers, a sense of finality washed over me. It was done. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Rachel's betrayal was officially closed. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The first few weeks after the divorce were a strange mix of liberation and loss. I moved into a modest apartment on the edge of town, filling it with the bare essentials. The silence was deafening at first, a stark contrast to the home Rachel and I had shared, but I told myself it was the price of starting over. The wounds she left behind were healing, slowly but surely. Then came the letters. At first, they were infrequent, handwritten notes slipped under my apartment door, signed simply, Rachel. The first one was filled with apologies and promises. The second was angrier, laced with accusations that I had abandoned her, left her with nothing. I ignored them, chalking them up to her inability to accept the consequences of her actions. But they kept coming. Each one grew darker, more erratic. She wrote about sleepless nights, about losing her job, about how Tom had left her when the affair became public. She blamed me for everything, her loneliness, her shattered reputation, even her financial struggles. Reading her words felt like glimpsing a storm brewing on the horizon, a distant threat I convinced myself wouldn't touch me. Then came the final letter. I found it one evening after returning from work, tucked beneath my windshield wiper. The envelope was plain, but the weight of it felt different, heavier somehow. My name was scrawled across the front in Rachel's familiar handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Something about this one felt wrong. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her words, written in a shaky hand, chilled me to the bone. Eric. I've lost everything. You were my anchor, my rock, and I threw it all away. I've tried to fix things, to make amends, but you won't let me. You've moved on, and I'm left here, drowning in the mess I created. I can't do this anymore. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't hate me. Please remember me as the woman you once loved, before I let the darkness consume me. Goodbye. Rachel. My heart raced as I read the letter again and again, willing it to mean something other than what it so clearly implied. My mind flooded with memories of her, her laugh, her smile, the way she used to rest her head on my shoulder after a long day. For all her flaws, for all the pain she caused, I couldn't bear the thought of her doing something so final. I called her immediately, my fingers trembling as I dialed. The line rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as I tried again, then again, each call met with the same lifeless tone. I grabbed my keys and drove to the house we had shared, praying I wasn't too late. The drive was a blur, every red light and slow-moving car a cruel obstacle in my race against time. When I finally arrived, the house was dark, its windows like empty eyes staring back at me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I fumbled with the spare key, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Inside, the silence was suffocating. I called her name, my voice echoing through the empty halls. No answer. I found her in the bedroom. Rachel lay on the bed, her face pale and serene, as if she were simply sleeping. A half-empty bottle of pills sat on the nightstand, next to a framed photo of us from happier times. My legs gave out beneath me, and I collapsed onto the floor, my hands clutching at my hair as a guttural cry escaped my throat. For all her faults, for all her mistakes, I had never wanted this. I had wanted her to live with the consequences of her actions, not to escape them in the most permanent way possible. The guilt hit me like a tidal wave, pulling me under, drowning me in what-ifs and should-haves. What if I had answered her calls? What if I had given her one more chance? What if I had done something, anything, to stop this? The paramedics arrived too late. The coroner's official cause of death was an overdose, but I knew better. Rachel's death wasn't just about the pills, it was about everything we had built and destroyed together. It was about the choices we had made, the words we had left unsaid. In the weeks that followed, I carried her final letter with me everywhere I went, its edges worn and frayed from constant handling. I read it when the guilt became unbearable, when I needed to remind myself that her choice wasn't my fault. But the weight of it never lifted. Some nights, I'd sit alone in my apartment, staring at the photo of us she had left behind. In it, we were smiling, carefree, two people who believed they had the world figured out. I wondered if that version of us could have been saved, if I had been braver or kinder or stronger. I'll never know. Rachel's death became the defining chapter of our story, overshadowing everything else. And though I tried to move forward, to rebuild the life I had so desperately fought for, a part of me would always be trapped in that moment, haunted by the shadow of what could have been.